Thank you, Surin, and hi everyone. Um, happy to be here and engaging with all of you. And yes, I am hoping that we will have a very interesting session, which will take course over most of this afternoon. Anyway, the topic that was given to me was talk about the nexus between the environment and the economy, how palm oil and sustainability and haze are interconnected, and there are a few missing pieces in between as well, which I will discuss. And also, challenge some of the current perceptions that some people might have in terms of the cause and effect of haze. What has what is the role of the private sector and the companies, and also I think something that is not so much talked about, which is the solutions part, and not just I'm not touching on the intergovernmental type of solutions, which I think Larry would cover more in detail, but more about the private sector response, because that I think is often overlooked. And it's interesting to know that especially in recent times, some of the big corporations in the world have GDPs that are bigger than some of the small countries in the world, right? So the role of the private sector cannot be overlooked. So yeah, I believe I have control now of the slide. Yeah, I do. Okay. So as a brief outline of my presentation, I will talk about some, what are the key drivers of deforestation, both in the Southeast Asia context and also globally, just to, understand the differences. And yeah, I know that some of you responded to the poll, so let's see whether, you're on the mark, or there are other things that you might have missed. And I will also try to link up between deforestation, haze, climate change, peatlands as well, right? So how they connect with each other. And then I'll zoom in a little bit more on palm oil, because palm oil is the topic that people seem to kind of immediately come to mind, have in their mind when it comes to haze. I'm not sure why, but maybe we can try to see what could be the reasons for that. Some of it valid, some maybe not so valid. And then we'll talk about how crop production in particular, and I'll use the example of palm oil, because there's a lot that has been done with regard to palm oil sustainability. But much of it is also applicable to other crops. Yeah. Okay, so just looking at it from a global point of view, what are the key drivers of deforestation? And this data is from the FAO. Unfortunately, we don't have very up-to-date data, because there is always a lag time in terms of coming up with the analysis, right? Because you have to look at the trends over a number of years, and then you have to spend quite a bit of time analyzing, and then you get a paper published and all that, right? So even though this paper was published, I think around 2011 or so, but the data was up to 2008, and maybe FAO might have come up with a more recent analysis. But you can see that while the the values might have changed, but if you look at the overall trend, even from 1990 and to the year 2000, you compare that with 2000, 2008, the trend hasn't changed that much in terms of what are the key drivers, right? So it's interesting to note, for example, that there's a lot of unexplained deforestation, as in, people don't know what the key drivers are. So maybe the area is burned and then it's left idle for a long time. People don't really know what has happened to it. So sometimes it's not really obvious what is the purpose of the deforestation, because the way that they track deforestation is to see after the area has been cleared, what gets planted on it. So the assumption is that whatever gets planted on it was the reason why the area was cleared in the first place. Okay. So, but I mean, between 1990, 2000 period to 2000 and 2008, at least more information was, I think the detection of deforestation improved. Also, the monitoring have improved, and therefore, the number of unexplained events has decreased, right, between those two time periods. You can see that. But in terms of the major drivers, you can see that the key ones are still there. No major change with regard to crop production. So the expansion of agriculture is still the leading cause of deforestation globally, followed by, as you can see, the dark blue here, livestock production actually. So so you have crops and then your livestock. Actually, both are basically different categories of agriculture, right? So you can say that if you combine these two, clearly agriculture by far is the main cause of deforestation. And then after that, you have natural hazards like wildfires. So fires can actually occur sporadically or on its own, right? Because of increased heat and so on, right? So you can combust naturally as well. And then you have some other minor causes, logging, industrial roundwood here, and then also infrastructure. So that's the global picture. And then if you look at the regional scenario, and I'm going to focus mainly on Southeast Asia because that's where we are, and that's what this session is all about, right? So I've put these two big arrows there just so that it's easier to focus on the specific section of the chart that you should be looking at. So if you look at the two time periods again, 2002 to 2008 and 1990 and year 2000, you can see that actually in Southeast Asia, there has been some changes in terms of the key drivers. Again, as with the global scenario, the number of deforestation events that are unexplained have dropped between the two time periods. So in 2008, you can see that unexplained deforestation is now not a major proportion of total deforestation, as you can see in 1990 and 2000. The main driver is crops, and again, that's not much change from the earlier time period. And then, but there's a big change in natural hazards. So in 1990 to 2000, you see that there's a lot of deforestation that was attributed to natural hazards, but then that has dropped significantly. And then the rest remain more or less the same. You have livestock, industrial roundwood or industrial logging, and then infrastructure development. Okay. And if you imagine just taking the portion that says crops here, like crops and livestock, these two categories, and you zoom in further into that. And here we have slightly more recent data. This is from a report that came out in 2016, but I think the source data is still covering 1990 to 2008. Actually, the main cause of the main driver of deforestation in the agricultural sector is livestock, right? So it's interesting, right? And this is where we talk about perception as well, right? There's a lot of NGOs, consumers campaigning against the use of palm oil, for example, because they say that palm oil is a major cause of deforestation. But you don't really hear people saying, okay, you got to stop eating beef or McDonald's or whatever because it's causing deforestation, right? So, but if you look at the facts, it actually says that beef, especially cattle farming, is a major cause of deforestation. Yep, by far. You can see the chart here, and then the other kinds of livestock, pig and poultry, because they tend to be more intensive, right? People have pig pens, they have chicken coops, they have kind of like a factory even, like the way chickens are being treated these days. You don't really have free-ranging chickens being bred in a large scale, but with beef, with cattle, you still need all that space for them to roam. So that, especially in Brazil, as you can imagine, huge areas are being cleared, being burned, and so on, in order to make space for cattle farming. So that is the key driver of deforestation worldwide. And then other crops, soy, maize, as Surin has mentioned, and then palm oil. So as you can see from a global ranking point of view, where crops are concerned, palm oil is actually ranked number 4. Not to say that it's totally blame-free. Yeah, still a significant amount of deforestation is due to palm oil expansion, oil palm expansion. But it seems like they're getting the palm oil people, the palm oil industry are getting a disproportionate amount of the bad press as compared to livestock. And more specific to Southeast Asia, we have two key elements of climate change, actually, or GHG emissions. So I've been talking a lot about deforestation. On the charts that I shared with you earlier was about deforestation. But the other big thing really is peat degradation, because not all forests are equal. So most forests around the world are not on peatland, right? They're on mineral soils. And so what you are concerned about is the whatever that's above ground, right? The trees, the leaves, the branches, whatever that's above ground, a little bit in the root as well. So when you have deforestation, all that plant material is going to decompose and turn into carbon dioxide, methane, all the greenhouse gases. So yeah, that's why deforestation is one of the main causes of GHG emission leading to climate change. But when you have forests on peat, then the problem is like double or triple, because a lot of the carbon is actually stored underground when you have peat soil. So peat soil basically is made up of undecomposed organic material. It's kind of like a huge carbon store within the soil. And then when you start draining the peat and start planting on it, that organic material will start to decompose, and it causes a huge amount of GHG emissions. So I put this simple event chart here just to show that you have deforestation, you have peat degradation, then you have this overlap in the middle where you have forest on peat, but you also have a lot of peat that is not forested anymore. Maybe the forest was cleared a long time ago, but as long as the peat soil remains with all that organic material there, it will continue to emit GHG gases. And in Southeast Asia, we have particularly deep peat that can go up to, say, even 3, 4, or 5 meters deep. So that's why it's a huge issue. And this is just a simple diagram showing how peat is formed. You can find out more about this yourself. But essentially, you have a waterlogged area. You have plants, trees growing, and then as time goes by, the trees they topple over, the organic material falls into the waterlogged area, and then you have soil starting to form over time, and this could be over hundreds or thousands of years. Eventually, you have the peat soil developing is kind of in a dome shape, and then you have a forest growing over it as well. And that's basically how you have all this organic material accumulated in the soil, and that basically is combustible and a major cause of fire and haze during the dry season. Yeah, so basically this is the kind of progression in terms of how peatlands end up from being in a natural situation. They get drained out because peat in its normal form is usually wet, and it's waterlogged. But in order to cultivate on peatlands, they will construct canals and drain water out, and then you end up with dried peat. The organic material is exposed to the sun. It starts to decompose and then becomes combustible. So two things happen. You have peat fire, and then the gases are released to the atmosphere, but the soil itself, as it gets burned, also subsides and sinks down, and then actually becomes flood prone as well during the wet season. So the end effect, you'll have GHG emissions and flooding, GHG emission fires during dry season, flooding during wet season. So it's a huge problem on many dimensions. Right. So that's just a pictorial kind of presentation of what I was saying just now in terms from natural peatlands, deforestation, clearing, drainage, peat fire, and then sometimes being planted with plantations. And one reason why you get a lot of oil palm planted on peat is because they do tolerate relatively high water table. Not all plants are able to survive in peatlands, but oil palm plantings are actually quite well adapted to that, and that's why you have huge areas of peat planted with oil palm. This is a pretty neat GIF that I got from an Indonesian site. I think it might have been BRG actually, which is the Indonesian agency. But as you can see, it's got this graphic that shows how fires can actually persist underground in the peatland because of the organic material, and then it might then come up to the surface. So that's why peatlands are notoriously difficult to manage, difficult to put out fires that are occurring in peatland, because these fires here can rage on for weeks, while on the top you might not see the fire, and then eventually they find an outlet, and then the fire will break out again. Interestingly, due to efforts by the Indonesian government, you can see that the deforestation rates have dropped between 2011 and 2020. And again, there's an issue of perception and biasness as well. From the Indonesian point of view, the government said that, well, it's mainly due to our action, because we have a peat moratorium, we have an oil palm moratorium, we set up the peat restoration agency, we've done a lot of things, we've worked with NGOs, blah, blah, and therefore we have managed to bring down the deforestation rate in Indonesia. And that is measurable, right? Because you have satellite imagery that can back it up, all kinds of data, right? But then you still have campaigning NGOs saying that, no, it's not really so much due to the effort of the Indonesian government, but it's more to do with NGO pressure, for example. It's got to do with COVID, because there's less activity during COVID. That's why the rates have dropped. So, you see this kind of debate going on as well. So that's another kind of dimension to this narrative. And then the other dimension, of course, is about oil palm, right? Because oil palm is the number one cause of deforestation and fires and haze, as far as most people are concerned. And even the poll that we did with you guys indicate that 100% all of you who took part in the polls think that oil palm is the main driver of fires and haze in Southeast Asia. But to the facts really back that up. So if you look at this, in terms of the percentage of deforestation that's caused by oil palm, yes, in Malaysia it's about close to 50% of deforestation is due to oil palm, but it also means that there's another 50% that's caused by something else that's not oil palm. And the percentage is even lower for Indonesia, where it's something like less than 20% is caused by oil palm expansion. And let's not forget that in Indonesia you have a lot more crops being planted, and mining is also a huge thing that is being conducted as in Indonesia, one of the key drivers of the economy there. So these are some of the other causes of deforestation that's not oil palm. Yeah. And then if you go to the northern or the other countries outside of Malaysia, Indonesia, then the causes of deforestation will be something else, because you hardly have oil palm planted in Cambodia or in Myanmar or Vietnam or Laos. So there it would be something else. Like it could be rubber, it could be maize, it could be sugarcane, some other kind of crop. Yeah. So it's important to bear that in mind as well. And then if you see the flip side of it, which is how much of the oil palm expansion actually is actually on forested land, because there's a lot of oil palm that's planted. Many of the oil palm plantations are quite old. Some of them are planted on top of land that used to be planted with rubber or other crops. So you have crop to crop kind of conversion, not necessarily forest to crop. Yeah. So again, the picture differs from country to country. And in Malaysia, you do still have quite a lot of oil palm that's planted on area that used to be forest. But then in some other countries, maybe the palm is planted in areas that were previously planted something else. And then zooming in on Indonesia, specifically Kalimantan and Sumatra, and just this is looking at hotspots, and this is where the fires are. And you can see that, yes, a substantial portion of the fires are in oil palm concessions, but there are many other categories of land where the fires are located. You have fires in protected areas or conservation areas. You have fires in logging concessions. You have fires in non-forested lands that are managed by individuals and communities, farmers basically, on pulpwood areas and so on, right? So it's not to say that the majority of hotspots are actually found within oil palm areas. So yeah, I mean, these are the facts. So yeah, still on this issue about the palm oil controversy. So I mean, despite the facts that I've shared with you, I mean, it can't be denied that there is a huge perception out there that palm oil is the main cause of deforestation, climate change, so on. And as you could see briefly in the previous slide just now, those were some of the key campaigning NGOs and other stakeholders that have been driving this debate on palm oil, and some of them have taken quite interesting approaches in terms of of highlighting the palm oil issue. You might have seen some of the campaigns that have been happening against Nestle, for example, where you have the Killer Kit Kat ad that was splashed all over the media previously. You have campaigners climbing up to the headquarters of the Cargill building in the US and unfurling the banners and so on. Yeah. So basically, I was going to show some slides about the companies that are involved that are already committed to sourcing sustainable palm oil. These are the downstream companies, the big multinationals that are buying palm oil, and these are Nestle, Unilever, Mondelez, Danone, PepsiCo, many of the huge corporations that you are aware of. These are the major buyers of palm oil. They have committed to buying only sustainable palm oil by the year 2020. And then in terms of the production side, some of the major palm oil companies that have committed to producing palm oil, these are the actual people who are planting the oil palm. These are the companies that have committed to producing sustainable palm oil, include Asian Agri, Indo Agri, New Britain Palm Oil, Cargill, Musimas, Wilmar, Sime Darby, IOI. Some of these companies are also familiar to you. So why they want to commit to sustainable palm oil is because they can access the global markets. I mentioned just now some of the downstream companies, the consumer brands that have made the commitment. So in order to be able to sell to these major users of palm oil, the companies need to commit to producing the palm oil so that they can continue selling and continue their business. There's also growing stakeholder expectations out there that they want to buy only palm oil that is produced sustainably. People are making a conscious decision. They're looking at the contents of whatever they're buying, making sure that they're not buying something that actually has got deforestation in the supply chain. So that's becoming a huge part of consumer behavior. And in response, there have been the creation of a few palm oil certification schemes. You have the Roundtable for Sustainable Palm Oil, or RSPO, globally, and then you also have the Indonesian Sustainable Palm Oil, or ISPO, the Malaysian Sustainable Palm Oil, or MSPO. And within the RSPO principles and criteria, basically the RSPO standards, there are provisions on no planting on peat, on the reduction of pollution and emission, on the avoidance of the use of fire in preparing the land, and also making sure that any new planting does not cause deforestation. Because when you think of it, I mean, why would plantation companies still want to use fire when clearing their land, when obviously there's a lot to lose, right? Because they can also lose their own oil palm trees that get burned by the fire. They can lose their certification. They can be fined by the government, and these days there are many ways of disposing of the debris when you're clearing the land that you don't need to use fire anymore. So it's clear that the cause of fire is not a simple thing. I mean, it's not just a matter of the landowners setting fire. I mean, in Indonesia, for example, it has been shown that quite a lot of the fires are caused by land speculators. I mean, they haven't got the ownership of the land yet, but they want to turn the forest or the peatland into bare land so that they can claim the land and say, look, this land is clear, it's not forested, I want to plant something there. So there's a lot of that going on as well, where the villagers might be working hand in hand with investors who are living in the city and so on, right? So it's a very multifaceted kind of situation when it comes to who actually causes the fire. I'll just end with a little bit of information that I picked up from the RSPO, which is the Roundtable for Sustainable Palm Oil. They have also started their own fire hotspot monitoring. And then in the year 2019, it was reported on their side that they detected 253 hotspots within the plantation areas of their RSPO members, 253, out of 59,839 hotspots throughout Malaysia and Indonesia. So basically, only 0.39% of all hotspots detected at that particular point in time was actually coming from the oil palm plantations owned by RSPO members, and the huge majority was actually detected elsewhere. So that's just give you an idea of the situation on the ground. So I'll end there. Thank you.